Welcome back. It's still Plus Politics. Now, May 27th all around the world is regarded as a Children's Day. Well, but in Nigeria, we call it Children's Day. It's the day of the International Day for the Child. However, many of the policies and laws that protect the Nigerian child are either not regarded or not even effective enough to protect the 21st century Nigerian child. Why is that? We will all ask. Well, what is our government doing in that regard? Joining me once again to have this conversation is Lulu Elegbe. He is a political analyst, and of course, Mr. Alistair Wilcox, who's also a political analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying back.
It's my pleasure.
So, I have with me the first part of the Child's Right Act. And the very first thing there is that the best interest of the child it must be paramount of all considerations in all actions. In other words, wherever you find a child in a family, the best interest of that child is paramount. Now it goes beyond that to list the things that the child needs. The child needs to be given protection and care. The child needs to be protected. The well-being of the child has to be brought into account. And this is the duty of the parents or the wards, legal guardians, or any other individual, institutions, agencies, organizations who are responsible for the child. Let's start with that, just that. But at the time when this act came out, a few states jumped on it. They domesticated it. But it took years for other states to even just, sign it into their law. So, I'm sure when you were coming here, you saw children in traffic, hawking, or scratching your car and begging for money. Can we say that the best interest of the Nigerian child is prioritized? I'll start with you, Lulu.
Well, I think that, my view of that act is that it's like a lot of other laws in Nigeria, it's individualized. So it's not, I wouldn't call it, it's official, so it's state policy or national policy, but in actual implementation, it's really not. And when I say it's individualized, it means the rights of a particular child are upheld in the home of that child. So by the parents, by the legal guardians, or whoever it is. So are some of these laws, do they actually protect children the way they're supposed to? Not really, no, because if they do, then the examples you just gave shouldn't even be happening. We're not the only ones driving on these roads. Government officials drive on these roads. These kids go and knock on the doors of quote-unquote big cars, which in some cases would be driven by government officials. So it's not just about hawking, it's about things like school, the quality of education, the quality of the schools as well. So at the end of the day, is it, obviously parents that can afford to send their children to better schools will always do that, so you can't begrudge them that. But the children that don't have anyone to speak for them, their parents cannot afford. There was the video of the girl on social media a few months ago who was sent home, was beaten and then sent home. Yeah, success. For not being able to pay school fees. Again, why on earth any school feels they need to beat a child
who's not paying her own school fees?
Who's not the one actually paying the school fees? That's beyond me. Thankfully, because of the exposure she got on social media, she's got a lot of scholarships, people have stepped in to help. But then my question is, what happens to the people in her shoes who can't make it to social media? Because there are millions of Nigerian children in that exact same position. So it shouldn't take a viral social media video to point to glaring problems with implementing these kinds of acts. It's not just about that, it's about the quality of the child from education all the way up.
I want to take it bit by bit, and this is for you, Mr. Wilcox. He made a statement about the fact that, it's just a law, whether we domesticate it or not, it doesn't necessarily apply as it should. Now, for a thing to be called law, it has to be enforced. So we have law enforcement agencies. Yes, and they all don't have to be the police. For example, in education, you have the Inspectorate of Education. There's supposed to also be counselors, school counselors, who are supposed to act like police also. For example, beating a child for not paying school fees, that's also somewhat infringing on the rights of a child.
Absolutely.
For you as a neighbor to another parent who is watching a child being molested or being, abused by maybe a step parent or a ward or whatever it is, you're supposed to also complain to authorities. But do we have child care services in this country?
That is where.
Let's start from the basics.
I think that is the basis. Do we have child care service in this country? The answer is 0, no. Now, that's a federal law. The Child's Right Act is a federal law.
But they're being domesticated in different states.
It is now required that every state should domesticate it for it, because the federal government has no child. Every child is either belongs to the local government and a state. Maybe apart from the children in FCT. Those are the ones that belong to the federal government. If you're not in FCT...
they belong to the Federal Capital Territory, not
well,
the
that is the federal government, because there's no state in Abuja. So then, but if you are not living in federal capital, so you belong to a state. So that's why the law is required that a state should domesticate it. And it was not, an enforceable, a compulsion that a state should domesticate. That's why they are at whims and caprice to domesticate it, to modify the domestication, because the laws are far-reaching. It even talked about the legal age for a child to get married, for a female child to get married, and all whatnot. Now, most of the provisions of that law has to do with the family. Family. Because government, you will not go and have children, and the government come and buy you SMA or Cerelac or this thing in your house, or come and tell you that your child should sleep in mosquito tent, or that your child should have good nutrition. Government will not do that. So it starts with individuals. Now, our cultural environment has robbed us of this kind of a thing. That even if you have a child care protection unit, the operators of that unit are part of the society. And of course, that's somebody that will have even maltreating her own child, that will not send her own child to school, that will make off her own child in the morning to go and fetch water, to go and sell akamu, like I did when I was a child, to go and sell pap in the morning, to go and do it before going to school. So
should there not have been, for example, you create an EFCC, there has to be a training of sorts that, look, you do not operate like any other person. This is the modus operandi, and if you are found guilty, the law is not scared of catching you first. So do we have that orientation process?
That's where I'm going. What are the penalties in that law? There are penalties, but who is the authority responsible for the penalty, and how is the penalty going to be administered? Those are what is lacking in the law, because it's just like Section 2 of our Constitution that talks about government providing shelter, food, and all what. But it's not just this, because you cannot take it to court. You understand? You cannot take that section to court that government must provide you with food, because government does not feed people. But the Constitution says it is the duty of government. But of course, it is not a justiciable part of our Constitution. I'm not allowed to further break that down, but I think we've had some good interaction on that scale. So the same thing with this law. If it's not domesticated in your state, it is not a law, because it's a federal law. And the duties of the state with respect to education starts from primary school to secondary school, maybe tertiary. And so who sends the child, who will ensure that the child goes to school? It is the local government that goes to primary school first and foremost. Who ensures that the child goes to secondary school? Is the state government. Who ensures that the child does not go to hawk? Is the state and local government. Now, Akwa Ibom did it. When Akpabio was in power, he did it because you discovered that people from Cross River and Akwa Ibom used to be more of houseboys and maids and all whatnot. But I think as part of the implementation of this law, there was something in that direction that anybody that didn't send his head to school will have certain punishment meted. That changed some of the narrative. It's not that everybody will comply, but the narrative changed. But if you take it now to a state like... The reason why it worked in some of those states, for Akwa Ibom, they were trying to clean that slate of houseboy syndrome. That Tonga, yeah.
But in Cross River State, what they were doing was every child of school age who was found not in school, whether they're hawking or at home, the parents will be made to face the law, and there was implementation. Yeah. So the streets,
as at the time, the governor that made it was there.
Under Imoke, but
has it continued?
I cannot speak for that.
That's the problem. So that's the problem. That means that
it can happen. We can make it happen. We can follow these things through. So what is the challenge? Why is it that other states have decided that we couldn't be bothered, like Lagos State and the rest of them? And yet, we're the first to run to the UN and append our signatures to these things and pay lip service to it. But our children are the highest number of out-of-school children, 70% of those being the girl child.
Yeah. I mean, it's two things. One, it's a question of priorities. A lot of the time we like to say this is important, or it's important to train the child and all these other good sounding things. But the reality is somewhat different. The reality is, how much of a priority do we actually give things like that? There's that question. Then there's a question of a lack of consequence. Because if the law says that any child of school age should be in school rather than on the streets, if that child is on the street in contravention of that law, what is the consequence for that? And the reality is that if there is no disincentive to do that, it's going to keep happening. It's not magic, it will keep happening. It's like anything else. If there's a lack of consequence, you're not going to stop anything from happening. So when we talk about what happened in Akwa Ibom or in Cross River and how they were able to do it, it takes. I don't really like to say. I don't really like to say government has to take the lead, but for something like this, they would have to, because if people see that the government is serious about this, we like to talk about body language politics in Nigeria. If the body language of a particular state government is that we're not going to let this happen, and people start to see consequences of contravening that law, that story will begin to change. But then I go back to the first issue of priorities. Is that really a priority for the government? From what I've seen, I don't think it is. I'm not sure why.
So we have the issue of too many children.
Good.
I was in secondary school when I knew about the Society for Family Health, and I probably understood half of what they were saying and not most of what they were saying. But, they broke it down, that you should not have too many children that you cannot cater for, because, that's where you have issues of not being able to pay the rent or to feed these children. Hence, they have to go and do some menial jobs. I've seen children of school age, carrying blocks and doing some things that they're not supposed to do. So I'm just wondering, how much do you think that the government, because we cannot exclude the government from all of this, how much have they done in conjunction with these other agencies that are trying to push that message of family planning or having as many children as you can handle? Yeah. Because that is where it starts. It's the baby boomers or the baby bloomers, that's what they call them.
Yes, today, you see, for me today, I don't think anybody will blame the government for the choices you make in terms of your family size. And that is where I will never accept that government. Those in government, some of them have 4 wives, 28 children.
That was funny.
Especially our brothers in either the Islamic cultural religion, or in the north, where they see wife and children as inheritance, part of inheritance. It happened down south, maybe in the eastern area, because then you see many wives you have and many children you have as the strength you have. But those areas have long...
It helped to, increase the farm work.
But those areas has long gone by. And so when the issues of Society for Family Health came up, family plan and all whatnot, it cascaded that even to the local government, grassroots. But don't also forget, then because of poverty in the rural areas, teenage pregnancy become rife. So pregnancy of a teenager, giving birth to a teenager, that one grows, and that teenager's this thing. Some people became grandmothers at the age of 30. Things like that happened. Even down south, not just north. But you see, because most of the family values broke down. And it's not government. When people come to say, look, these messages could be better passed through traditional institutions.
Okay.
Traditional institutions are the ones, this kind of laws, it should be taken up by traditional institutions as part of their responsibilities.
Okay.
Because really and truly,
we don't have
government
time.
sits somewhere, and then you are in your village, your local government, doing the things they want to do, increasing your population, increasing your size of your family as you like.
Okay, Mr. Wilcox, we need to go.
Government.
We have just a few seconds.
We need to be more responsible.
What other things do we need to do to spread this message to all that need to hear it? Because it sounds like, if you, I've been somewhere before and I said, oh, I just want to have one kid, and they're looking at me like, you're evil, you're a wicked woman. I mean, how do we try to make people see reasons with what these agencies are trying to preach, that it's not evil, but it's, you know, needful?
Yeah, I mean, it's about pointing out where the disadvantage, amplifying the advantages, I think. Because if you're able to show people that, look, this is what happens if you have 2 kids. This is what happens if you have 20 kids. Without 20 kids doesn't show how wealthy you are. Maybe it did 100 years ago, not in the world we live in today. And the more we can amplify that message, I think the more, hopefully, we'll start to listen.
Okay, amplify the message, and hopefully people use the traditional institutions. Thank you very much, Lulu Elegbe and Lester Wilcox, both political analysts. Thank you very much for speaking with us. It's been a very interesting conversation. We'll take a break now, and when we return, I'll give you my take. Stay with us.
Newly elected South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Saturday at his inauguration he is committed to tackling serious challenges the country faces. He said this during the inauguration ceremony in Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria. He made the commitment after being sworn in as South Africa's 5th president since 1994. Ramaphosa took the oath of office before Chief Justice Moeng Moeng under the watch of over 30,000 supporters. In his speech delivered at the ceremony, Ramaphosa pledged to root out corruption and to address socio-economic problems plaguing South Africa. Ramaphosa considered that the hopes of South Africans have been betrayed in the past as leaders lost sight of their mandates.
Let us declare that when we gather to celebrate the 50th year of our freedom, there shall no longer be any person in this land who is unable to meet their basic needs. In recent times, our people have watched as some of those in whom they had invested their trust have surrendered to the temptation of power and riches. They have seen some of the very institutions of our democracy eroded and resources squandered. The challenges that our country faces are huge and they are real, but they are not insurmountable. They can be solved, and I extend here to say that they are going to be solved. We declare that our progress as South Africa in all our endeavors depends on and cannot be separated from the onward march of our beloved continent, Africa.
Well, it's time for my take. I'll tell you that it's not enough to declare a public holiday on Children's Day, as we always do when we are top of the list of out-of-school children. Yes, our level of education is one of the lowest globally, and 70% of those out-of-school children are girls. We need to do better. We need to create safe spaces for our children to get an education, because they cannot be trying to get an education and still dodging bullets here and there. The government needs to step up. And as for ASU, I think it's time for Nigerians, as the parents, siblings and friends of students who are victims of this incessant strike, to stand up and do something. Why would the government agree to something and not make good on those promises? If we're being governed by people who are not straightforward, people who don't stay true to their word, then we're in for it. Well, that's all for today. Do join us tomorrow. I am Marianne Okun, and it's been Plus Politics. Do have a great day.